The first thing you should know is that the moment people think they understand your finances, they stop listening to anything else you say. Their eyes glaze over or sharpen, their voices change, their kindness recalculates itself. I learned that long before I ever learned how to negotiate a contract or read a balance sheet. I learned it watching adults talk around my mother like she was invisible once they decided what she could afford. Silence, I realized, was not emptiness. Silence was control. I never lied about money, I just never volunteered it. That difference mattered to me. My name is Elowen Price, and for most of my adult life, I perfected the quiet version of myself, the one that did not announce wins. The one that dressed for comfort and anonymity, the one that let people assume whatever made them comfortable. It kept rooms calm, it kept conversations honest, and it showed me who people were when they thought there was nothing to gain. I never told my fiancé how much I earned each month because it never felt relevant to who we were together. We met through work, not money. We bonded over long walks, cheap takeout, shared exhaustion. He saw my apartment, small but clean, sunlight pouring in through windows that overlooked a parking lot instead of a skyline. He saw me cook at home, mend my own clothes, turn down expensive outings without complaint. He assumed frugality meant limitation. I let him believe that because he never asked, and because I was curious about something I could not measure with numbers. I lived simply by choice, not necessity. The careful budgeting theater was something I performed with ease. Generic brands, old furniture, neutral colors. I wore clothes that fit well but did not announce themselves. Nothing flashy, nothing that invited questions. I liked the way it made the world quieter around me. When he proposed, it was sweet and imperfect and sincere. I said yes without hesitation. I loved him. I believed in us. And when he invited me to dinner with his parents for the first time, I accepted just as easily. I noticed, though, how he framed it, how he mentioned their neighborhood, how he warned me his mother could be intense, how he joked that they might worry about whether I could keep up with their lifestyle. I smiled and said nothing. I could have corrected him then. I could have explained that keeping up had never been my problem, that stability had been my choice, not my ceiling. But something in his tone made me pause. There was an assumption tucked inside his words, and I wanted to see where it came from. I wanted to meet his family without the armor of numbers, without the distortion of perceived value. I wanted to see how they treated someone they believed had less, so I let them believe I was struggling. Not dramatically, not pathetically, just enough to be small, enough to be manageable, enough to be judged. I dressed the way I always did. Clean lines, no labels, shoes I had owned for years. I brought a bottle of wine that was thoughtful but unremarkable. When his mother asked where I lived, I gave the neighborhood, not the square footage. When his father asked what I did, I described the role, not the compensation. Each answer was honest, each one incomplete. As the evening approached, a strange calm settled over me. This was not anxiety, it was clarity. I realized this dinner was not a test I needed to pass. It was an observation I needed to make. These people mattered to him. If they were going to be my family, I needed to know what kindness looked like when it was not rewarded. We parked in front of their house just as the sun dipped low enough to cast everything in gold. The place was larger than I expected, manicured and confident. My fiancé squeezed my hand and smiled, proud in a way that was almost performative. I smiled back, feeling the weight of what I had chosen. As I stepped up onto their porch and reached for the doorbell, a thought settled quietly into my chest. Whatever happened inside that house was going to change something. I did not know what yet. I only knew that this dinner was not about food, and that once I crossed that threshold, there would be no unseeing what followed. The moment I stepped inside their house, I understood that this evening was not a welcome. It was an assessment. The air felt tight, not unfriendly exactly, but measured, as if every movement I made was being quietly scored. His mother took my coat with a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes, her gaze flicking from the fabric to the seams to the buttons, cataloging quality in seconds. Her eyes traveled down to my shoes, paused, then back up to my face. I straightened my posture instinctively, not because I felt ashamed, but because I recognized scrutiny when I felt it. His father shook my hand firmly and asked what I did for work. Not what I enjoyed, not how I liked it, what I did. The question landed like a calculator being placed on a table. I answered truthfully, describing my role, my responsibilities, the long hours. I did not mention numbers. I did not mention scale. I watched his brow tighten just slightly, the way people react when the math does not immediately impress them. He nodded, already adjusting his expectations. We moved into the dining room, and the house revealed itself slowly. Everything was intentional: coordinated furniture, framed accomplishments, subtle luxury meant to be noticed by those who knew how to look. His mother gestured for us to sit, placing me carefully, not beside her, but across the table, where she could watch me unobstructed. She asked where I lived and smiled when I named my neighborhood. Her response was quick, sympathetic. "That must be convenient," she said, in a tone reserved for compromises. Dinner unfolded with polite conversation, layered over judgment so thin it was almost translucent. His sister joined in, younger, sharper, her curiosity edged with amusement. She asked how we managed expenses in the city. She asked if I found it stressful. I answered calmly, letting modesty fill the gaps where abundance lived comfortably. I spoke about budgeting habits I had chosen, and they heard limitation instead. I spoke about preference, and they translated necessity. Advice followed, uninvited and relentless. His mother suggested ways to save on groceries. His father mentioned the importance of marrying someone financially stable, glancing briefly at his son as if including me was optional. They framed concern as wisdom, generosity as tolerance. Each comment was delivered softly, almost kindly, which somehow made them land harder, needles wrapped in velvet. What unsettled me most was not them, it was him. He sat beside me, smiling, nodding, occasionally laughing at jokes that edged too close to insult. When his mother warned him about taking on too much responsibility, he squeezed my knee under the table, not in defense, but reassurance. As if to say, "It is fine, they mean well." He never corrected them, never clarified, never once said, "That is not accurate." His silence pressed into my side, heavier than his hand. At one point, his father raised a glass and made a toast about ambition and tradition, about choosing wisely and building a future that matched the family's standards. He looked directly at me as he said it, smiling politely. I lifted my glass and met his gaze, steady and unflinching. I wondered if he would still smile, if he knew what sat quietly in my accounts, what I had built without spectacle or approval. Between courses, his mother excused herself and returned with a stack of brochures she placed gently near me. Financial planning services, community workshops. She spoke about them the way people speak to someone they believe needs guidance, not autonomy. I thanked her sincerely and set them aside. By the time dessert arrived, they had already decided who I was. Someone manageable, someone fortunate, someone who should be grateful for inclusion. I felt oddly calm, like an observer watching a study unfold exactly as predicted. The room buzzed with certainty that was not earned. As we stood to leave, his mother hugged me briefly, her arms light, careful. His father shook my hand again, firmer this time, like sealing an agreement I had never consented to. Outside, the night air felt cooler, clearer. My fiancé smiled, asked if I had a good time. I told him yes. What I did not say was that I had just learned more about my future than I ever wanted to know. The longer the evening stretched on, the more comfortable they became. Comfort has a way of loosening people, of pulling the truth out through casual remarks and half jokes. Plates were cleared, wine was refilled, and the room settled into something that felt almost relaxed. That was when the masks began to slip, not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, confident gestures that told me they believed they had already placed me where I belonged. His sister leaned back in her chair and started teasing him about his generosity. She joked about how he had always liked projects, always liked fixing things. Her eyes flicked to me when she said it, quick and sharp, then she laughed like it was nothing. I laughed too, lightly, because that is what you do when someone is testing how much you will swallow without choking. The joke landed exactly where it was meant to. His mother followed with concern that came dressed as kindness. She asked if I found managing my finances overwhelming and launched into suggestions before I could answer. Budgeting apps, coupons, side work. She spoke gently, as if she were offering a gift. Each word carried the assumption that I needed saving. I thanked her again, because politeness is a language I speak fluently, even when it costs me something. His father waited until the room was quiet before speaking. He cleared his throat and looked at his son with a pride that was unmistakable, then turned to me. He said relationships were about balance and that not everyone brought the same things to the table. He told me I should be grateful to have found someone so stable, so established, someone willing to shoulder responsibility. The word grateful hung between us, heavy and deliberate. I nodded because arguing would have given him more power than agreement ever could. What fascinated me was how generosity transformed the moment they believed someone needed it. Offers became obligations, advice became instruction, concern became control. They talked about my future like it was a plan they were drafting, not a life I was living, where I might live. What kind of work was practical for someone like me? How children changed priorities, smaller choices, safer options, everything neatly contained. I watched their faces as they spoke, memorizing expressions, the way confidence sharpened their features. I noted how quickly respect evaporated once they assumed it was not required. I saw how easily kindness turned transactional. None of it was loud. None of it was cruel enough to protest without looking ungrateful. That was the brilliance of it. My fiancé laughed along with them, not loudly, not cruelly, but comfortably. When his sister made another joke, he shook his head and smiled like it was harmless. When his father spoke about responsibility, he nodded. Once, just once, he squeezed my hand under the table. It was not protective. It was not reassuring. It felt like punctuation at the end of a sentence I had not written. That squeeze told me everything. By the time coffee was poured, they had finished rearranging me. I was someone who would need guidance, someone who would benefit from their wisdom, someone who should be careful not to overreach. His mother spoke about family values and sacrifice, about knowing your place and appreciating opportunity. His sister checked her phone and smirked, already bored now that she had decided who I was. I smiled through it all. I asked questions. I listened. I thanked them for their concern, their advice, their warmth. I played the role they had written for me because there was no advantage in tearing the script apart yet. The more they talked, the clearer everything became. When we finally stood to leave, his mother hugged me again, longer this time, like sealing an understanding. His father wished me luck, a phrase that felt oddly final. Outside, the porch light cast long shadows across the driveway. My fiancé exhaled and said his parents liked me. I smiled and agreed. As we walked to the car, I realized that nothing had gone wrong that night. It had gone exactly as it was always going to go. I had seen them clearly. And more importantly, I had seen him. Something fundamental had shifted, cracked clean through, and there was no careful budgeting trick in the world that could fix it. After that first dinner, I did not confront anyone. Not his parents, not his sister, not even him. I let the quiet stretch because I needed to be sure of what I was seeing. Explosions feel satisfying, but they burn evidence along with bridges. I was not interested in drama. I was interested in truth. So I stopped performing slowly, deliberately, the way you ease your foot off a brake without alerting the driver behind you. I paid closer attention to what my fiancé asked and what he never did. He never asked how I planned. He never asked how I saved. He never asked how I slept so calmly when uncertainty supposedly hovered over my life. He assumed simplicity meant scarcity, and I let that assumption live because it was comfortable for him. Comfort, I was learning, mattered more to him than understanding. What he never knew was not a single secret, but a pattern. Multiple income streams that did not require announcements. Contracts negotiated quietly, renewed without ceremony. Savings built intentionally, diversified, untouched. Choices made early and often, always with an exit in mind. I had learned long ago that security was not loud. It did not beg to be acknowledged. It just existed, waiting. When his parents invited us to dinner again, it felt less like an invitation and more like a continuation. The tone was familiar, almost warm, because familiarity breeds confidence. This time, they spoke about money openly, casually, as if I were a piece of furniture in the room. They discussed housing markets, investment risks, family expectations. His mother mentioned helping us if things got tight. His father talked about the importance of not letting pride get in the way of support. Something in me settled. I realized I was done collecting data. When his mother suggested a financial planning seminar she thought I would benefit from, I smiled and corrected her gently. I said I already worked closely with advisors. Her smile froze, just slightly. His father asked what I meant, and I clarified one assumption, then another. I did not raise my voice. I did not list numbers. I simply spoke plainly, the way you do when you are done being misunderstood. The room changed temperature. Questions followed, sharper now, less indulgent. Where had I learned to do that? How long had I been planning like this? My answers were calm, precise, and intentionally incomplete. I watched their faces recalibrate in real time, the way people do when the math suddenly stops working. His sister stopped smirking. His mother stopped offering advice. His father stopped leaning back in his chair. My fiancé stared at me like he was watching a stranger speak through my mouth. He laughed once, uncertain, as if expecting me to stop, to soften it, to turn it into a joke. I did not. I corrected another assumption, then another, not to punish them, but to end the fiction. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. That was when I saw it. Not confusion, not surprise, betrayal, not theirs. His. He was not upset that his parents had underestimated me. He was upset that I had not told him, that I had not arranged myself into a story he understood, that I had chosen privacy over reassurance. The look on his face was not relief, it was offense. I understood then that the real test had never been his parents. It had been him. They were predictable. They behaved exactly as people do when they believe hierarchy is fixed. He, on the other hand, had watched it happen. He had benefited from it, and now he felt exposed. On the drive home, he asked why I had kept things from him. His voice was careful, wounded. I told him I had never hidden anything he had asked to know. That silence fell between us again, heavier than before. He did not argue. He did not apologize. He just drove. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling and felt something close quietly inside me. Not anger, not heartbreak, recognition. The realization that I had been more transparent with his parents in one evening than he had ever been with me, and that the trust I thought we were building had only existed in one direction. The betrayal was not loud. It did not announce itself. It simply stood up, introduced itself, and waited for me to acknowledge it. The last conversation did not happen in a raised voice or a dramatic setting. It happened in his apartment on a quiet evening, the kind of ordinary moment where people expect things to smooth over if they just talk long enough. His parents were there because he had asked them to come. He thought it would help. He thought numbers would scare me back into place if they came from him instead of me. He thought wrong. I stood in the living room where I had once sat quietly, politely absorbing judgment, and I told them exactly what I earned each month. I did not round. I did not soften. I did not apologize for the scale of it. I told them what I contributed to our shared plans, what I paid without comment, what I chose to live without because it suited me. I explained that simplicity was not absence, and restraint was not weakness. The room went very still. His mother opened her mouth first, then closed it again. Her posture changed, the confident tilt of authority slipping into something cautious. His father asked a question that did not land as intended, something about why I had not said something sooner. I answered calmly that nobody had ever asked me with respect. Silence followed, heavier this time, because it could not be filled with advice. My fiancé tried to speak then. He started with my name, his voice strained, already framing this as a misunderstanding. I raised my hand and stopped him. This is not a discussion. That was the moment everything ended. Not because of money, not because of his parents, but because he had watched me be diminished and found it convenient. Because he had confused my privacy with permission. Because when the truth no longer fit his expectations, his instinct was to manage me instead of stand beside me. I told him why this was over, not angrily, not tearfully. I explained that I could not build a life with someone who required me to be smaller in order to feel secure, that I would not marry into a family that measured worth only after counting what they could extract. That love without respect was just maintenance work, and I was done maintaining something that never protected me. His parents looked at him then, waiting for him to fix it. He could not. The authority they had assumed evaporated in real time, replaced by the uncomfortable knowledge that their judgments had cost them access. No apology came that mattered. No explanation reached far enough back to undo what had already been revealed. I gathered my coat and my bag. I did not rush. I did not linger. I thanked them for their honesty because it had saved me years of confusion. I wished them well because indifference is kinder than bitterness when you are finished. When I reached the door, my fiancé followed, his voice low, urgent, promising conversation, therapy, understanding. I looked at him once, long enough to confirm there was nothing left to salvage. I walked out and closed the door behind me. The hallway was quiet. The night air felt clean. I did not cry. I did not shake. I felt something steadier than relief. I felt alignment. In the weeks that followed, there were messages, apologies shaped like explanations. Concern dressed up as regret. I did not engage. Closure does not require consensus. It requires decision. My future remained intact because it had never been dependent on their approval. What stayed with me was not the shock on their faces or the collapse of their certainty. It was the pattern underneath it all. How quickly people assign roles when they believe someone needs them. How generosity curdles into control the moment leverage appears. How betrayal so often arrives disguised as concern, advice, family values. Power is not loud. It does not announce itself or demand recognition. It waits. It watches. And when the moment comes, it collects quietly, without spectacle, leaving nothing unresolved. I learned that night that the truest measure of security is not what you have, but what you are willing to walk away from.